Welcome to the deep dive. We are here to take the most tangled, complex source material, filter it, untangle it, and hand you the clarity you need.
And today, we are really plunging deep. We're getting into the shadows of what the sources call the Ferguson Affair.
It's just a spectacular narrative. It starts with a small, almost mundane theft, and then it explodes. It spirals into murder, identity fraud, and high society secrets.
And these secrets are so deeply buried, they actually end up defining the fates of a whole new generation. It's really something.
That's exactly right. And for this deep dive, the sources we navigated really span two completely distinct worlds.
Totally different. On one hand, you have the grimy, desperate streets of a city called Buena Vista.
And on the other, the rarefied, moneyed isolation of a place called Mountain Grove.
So our mission today is to connect the dots. We're going to link a handful of stolen diamonds, a messy pawn shop killing, and what appears to be a high-profile kidnapping.
And we're going to reveal how identity, both criminal and personal identity, was really the primary weapon in this whole sprawling conspiracy.
It really was.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Our initial point of entry, the man trying to make sense of all this chaos, is an attorney named William Gunnarson.
Right. Gunnarson's a court-appointed defense lawyer. He's not looking for trouble, just trying to do his job.
And he gets handed the case of a young woman, Ella Barker. She's been locked up for selling a stolen diamond ring to a pawn shop owner, a guy named Hector Broadman.
So Gunnarson goes to the jail to see her, and right away, Ella is just a massive contradiction.
How so?
Well, she's young, she's in for what looks like petty theft, but her whole demeanor, it's like she's sitting on state secrets or something. She is completely uncooperative.
Doesn't even want his help.
Not at all. She dismisses his name, his attempts to help her, and you can tell this isn't just, typical prisoner reluctance. This is paralyzing fear.
So what's her story? Does she admit to anything?
Well, she lies at first. Says she found the ring. Then she sort of backtracks and claims it was given to her by some unnamed man. Like a cheap engagement ring.
It's fascinating because Gunnarson, he seems to pick up on her panic, not her supposed criminality.
He does. He seems to believe she's fundamentally a decent person who's just been dragged into something way too deep for her.
So he presses her. He argues, the fastest way out of this is to confess. Just name the person who gave you the ring. Name the person who made your offense.
But the second he pushes her to name the man, this wall just goes up. She asks him, "Say, I do tell you all about that fellow. His name." And then she just stops.
And that's when the real stakes of the situation just drop like a stone.
Exactly. Gunnarson is talking about helping the police, helping the community, doing the right thing.
And she gives him this icy reality check, she says. And this line really sets the tone for the entire deep dive.
What does she say?
Sure, and end up in the cemetery. Why don't you go away and leave me alone, Mr. Gunnarson? You just don't understand. Yeah. She goes on, I want to help you and all, and get out of here, but I want to go on living too.
And that tells you everything, doesn't it? This ring, this case, It's not just about some burglary.
Not at all. It involves people who have the capacity and the reach to execute a threat like that, even against someone who's already in police custody.
So Gunnarson has to realize right then and there, he's not dealing with common thieves. This is an organized network. They're capable of silencing witnesses.
And the most crucial part, Ella never, ever names the man. She only refers to him as Larry.
She holds on to that secret for dear life, which just shows you the profound power this Larry person holds over the entire operation.
You can just feel that sense of dread building. And, of course, events immediately prove her terror was completely justified.
Oh, absolutely. Before Gunnarson can even really process the depth of Ella's fear, the whole situation just explodes into violence.
It's fast, isn't it?
It's literally within hours of Gunnarson's visit to the jail. The source material tells us that a Detective Lieutenant Wills gets a call.
Right. Trouble on Pelly Street.
Somebody tried to knock off Hector Broadman. The low-level fence, the pawn shop owner. He's the victim of a brutal assault and robbery.
And the description of Broadman's pawn shop is so key to understanding this whole environment.
It's not just a shop, is it?
No, it's chaos. It's described as looking like the nest of a giant magpie, choked with the debris of people's lives.
It's dark, dusty, full of evidence of his illicit trade. Broadman wasn't just some small-time dealer. He was clearly a fence.
Meaning he specialized in buying and selling stolen goods. He was the logistical backbone for this whole burglary operation.
And Wills confirms this, doesn't he? He cites clear evidence that Broadman was fencing goods.
He does. They found an ormolu clock from that high-profile Hampshire burglary. And where do they find it?
Right there in Broadman's store.
And the crime scene itself is just shocking. Broadman is still alive. He's struggling, convulsive. He's trying to crawl under a bed.
He's actually refusing medical attention.
Which is so strange, this stubborn, desperate refusal. It sets the stage for the arrival of two critical and completely unexpected players.
The ambulance drivers.
Yeah. We meet Whitey, the older, jaded attendant, and his younger, plump partner, a guy named Ronald Spice.
And they have to physically fight Broadman to get him on the gurney. It's a violent struggle.
We tend to think of ambulance drivers as, purely there to help. It's a service you trust implicitly.
But the sources really focus on how routine and cynical their movements are. They're just detached, dealing with the messy human element of crime.
They eventually haul Broadman out, spread-eagled, this desperate man fighting for his life.
And the community response is just grim. A woman in a shawl whispers that Broadman had it coming to him.
So that tells you, Broadman was exploiting the vulnerable, and now the circle of violence has caught up to him.
And the situation just accelerates from there. Wills gets the news soon after.
Broadman died. He was DOA.
Dead on arrival, which that immediately raises a red flag, doesn't it? I mean, he was fighting them just moments before.
It's a huge red flag, and Wills immediately pivots. He argues that Ella Barker is the police's best chance now.
Because she was locked up, she was clean during the murder, she's their last connection to the ring.
It's a textbook police response when you're under pressure. You focus on the knowns, you push for a quick win.
So they zero in on a guy named Gus Donato. They identify him as the probable murderer and a known accomplice of Broadman.
They're desperate for a quick resolution, and they get one, courtesy of Will's right-hand man, Sergeant Granada.
Right. Granada tracks Donato to this old abandoned ice plant by the railroad tracks.
And Granada's story is that he caught Donato moving loot that had been stashed in Broadman's basement.
And he claims Donato resisted arrest, which forced Granada to shoot and kill him.
And just like that, the police pronounced the case closed. Donato killed Broadman, and Granada, the hero cop, brought him down. Case solved.
I find that immediate closure deeply unsatisfying.
Oh, me too. And clearly Gunnarson did as well. It just raises immediate questions.
Like, why was Donato moving loot from the basement after the murder?
Right. And why was Granada, who seems like more of a beat cop, so dedicated to this independent investigation that he went out on his own time and took a killer?
The whole narrative just immediately suggests that you should be skeptical of this neat little bow they've tied on it.
Especially because Gunnarson knows that Ella was terrified of Larry, not Gus Donato.
And that skepticism is totally warranted, because we soon learn that Granada, despite the official story of heroic police work, he had this decades-long, intensely personal vendetta against Gus Donato.
So when the police can wrap up a case this quickly, by eliminating the key suspect and removing any chance for him to give a counter-story,
it's usually a sign that they are either extremely efficient or they're hiding something.
And given everything in the source material, the latter seems far, far more likely. So the official police investigation is seemingly wrapped up, the public is satisfied, but Gunnarson, he's driven by his doubts.
And that lingering fear in Ella's eyes, he can't let it go.
He can't, so he pivots entirely. He decides the Pelly Street murder is a dead end for now, and he focuses on the man behind the ring.
Larry.
Exactly. And this is where the story shifts dramatically. It crosses the class line right out of the underworld and into the exclusive, rarefied atmosphere of high society.
Larry Gaines is Gunnarson's primary target, and he quickly traces him to the Foothill Club.
A place of just extreme wealth and seclusion.
And the description is such a stark contrast to Broadman's dirty pawn shop. Here you have men in expensive, sensible shoes worrying about minor details.
The atmosphere is described as purified, with these silver-dollar eucalyptus trees gleaming in the twilight. It's a completely insulated world.
Which makes it perfect for a practiced con man to operate in.
Gunnarson meets Bidwell, the club manager. And this guy is clearly nervous. He's practically sweating, terrified of the PR nightmare that Gaines has caused.
And Bidwell confirms it. Gaines was an ex-lifeguard he had just fired the week before.
The official reason was inappropriate attention to a member's wife.
Though Bidwell nervously tries to downplay the wife's role, right? He suggests she was just as much to blame.
He does. But what's so fascinating about Gaines, based on Bidwell's account, is his meticulous construction of his own identity.
Bidwell admits Gaines had a certain greasy charm, And he wasn't a young kid either. He was around 25, 26. Older than the usual college hire.
But he traded on the club members' sympathy. He registered at Buena Vista College, cultivated this image of a struggling scholar trying to better himself.
A role he dropped pretty quickly once the sympathy ran out.
And he was always seeking attention, always getting his picture taken. The source says he had a deeply self-conscious, actorish air. He was practicing to be someone else.
And here is where the low-level crime with Ella Barker's ring connects directly to the absolute highest echelon of society.
Bidwell, he's so anxious to just spill the whole disaster. He reveals the explosive nature of the scandal.
Colonel Ian Ferguson's wife, Holly May, an ex-movie actress, had eloped with Gaines.
It's a huge scandal. Bidwell even pulls out a syndicated column clipping to prove it.
Right, detailing how the ex-movie tidbit ran off with a gorgeous hunk of muscle who was just a Marine menial at the club.
So this is a local embarrassment that's become a national spectacle overnight.
And the details of the so-called elopement are extremely telling. They don't suggest a romantic escape at all.
No, it sounds like a sudden, calculated departure. Bidwell says Holly May was having dinner with Colonel Ferguson the night before when she gets a phone call.
And she just walks directly out of the dining room and meets Gaines in the parking lot.
The speed, the method of her exit, it suggests this was all prearranged, maybe even under duress, or it was the culmination of a very long, high-stakes plan.
And then the story twists again. It moves away from just scandal and toward a genuine crisis.
Gunnarson goes to meet Colonel Ferguson, who is just reeling. He's drinking heavily, he's isolated by his wealth, and he's completely devastated.
And Ferguson insists the elopement was a cover story. He says his wife, Holly May, was abducted.
And the kidnappers demanded a massive ransom, $200,000.
So this immediately raises the question, is Ferguson delusional, trying to save face, or is he telling the truth?
He is absolutely adamant that he cannot involve the police.
Why not?
Because the abductors are sophisticated, they threatened to kill Holly May, and they claimed, and this is key, they are in a position to know every move the police make.
They have a pipeline to the authorities.
Exactly. And Ferguson, who's described as a pig-headed Scots-Canadian made arrogant and lonely by his money, he refuses to trust the local cops. He thinks they're either compromised or just incompetent.
His own isolation and arrogance, born of his wealth, make him incredibly vulnerable to a sophisticated con like this.
But the sources give us this key piece of supporting evidence that really pushes the balance toward abduction.
Tony Padilla, the bartender at the Foothill Club.
Yes. He confirms that Holly May was wearing $50,000 in diamonds when she left that night.
And Padilla, he grew up on Pelly Street. He understands the town's darker side.
He tells Gunnarson that much wealth on display, combined with a sudden disappearance, that suggests robbery or foul play, not a romantic getaway.
He says, "You don't know this town like I do. The jewels, they mean she was a target. The sudden exit smells of opportunism, not passion."
So now Gunnarson is caught between two converging storms.
On Pelly Street, the police have prematurely closed a murder case based on what's probably a frame-up driven by a personal vendetta.
And up in the foothills, his new client, Colonel Ferguson, is convinced he's paying a ransom to save his wife, but he won't get the police involved because the abductors claim to have eyes and ears inside the department.
Both situations demand a much deeper understanding of this criminal network's connections to authority. It's getting very complicated.
The pressure is just mounting on Gunnarson. He now has to solve both a murder and a kidnapping, and he's navigating the skepticism of Detective Wills and the massive desperation of Colonel Ferguson.
So the only way forward is to truly understand what happened to Broadman.
And that means listening to the counter-narrative, starting with Gus Donato's grieving widow.
Exactly. This is where Secondina Donato steps in, and she is a formidable character. She is driven by grief and absolute fury.
And she insists vehemently that Gus did not kill Broadman.
She doesn't just say he's innocent. She openly and immediately accuses Sergeant Granada of being a crooked cop.
With a deep historical and personal motive for killing Gus.
And we learn this isn't just some recent grudge. Secondina details a conflict that goes back a full decade.
Up to when they were all teenagers.
Right. She, Gus, and Granada were all part of the same wild teenage gang smoking weed, stealing cars.
And it all came to a head when Gus and Granada fought over Secondina.
Gus, who was physically no match for the football player Granada, used a knife, put a little hole in Granada's chest.
Granada ran away, the gang was raided shortly after, and Gus was sent to the reformatory.
And Secondina believes Granada never forgave Gus for that. She says he harassed him for years, and it all culminated in him shooting Gus down like a dog at the old ice plant and calling it justice.
This narrative just fundamentally alters the police's neat closure of the murder.
Oh, completely. Granada's action is now less about solving a crime and more about executing a personal vendetta under the cover of his police duty.
The source material intentionally gives us this deep backstory to force us to view that quick solution as highly suspect, if not, outright malicious.
But Secundina doesn't stop at motive. She provides a critical piece of forensic information that just demolishes the official theory on Broadman's death.
She repeats a rumor she heard from a friend, a nurse's aide in the emergency room.
The aide said Broadman was DOA, and he looked to her like he was strangulated.
Which totally contradicts the official story Wills was pushing, that Broadman died from head blows and a delayed reaction.
And it perfectly explains why Wills was so non-committal about the autopsy earlier.
So when Gunnarson eventually confronts the pathologist, Dr. Simeon, the doctor confirms it. There was no skull fracture, no blood clot. The blows weren't necessarily fatal.
Broadman could have been strangled if he was already weakened or unconscious. It would have required not too much pressure.
Which suggests Broadman was finished off after the initial assault.
Maybe. During the ambulance ride itself.
This detail is absolutely pivotal. It means the crime wasn't just a robbery gone wrong at the pawn shop. It was a targeted, clinical execution.
And the ambulance men who transported the body are suddenly thrust right into the center of suspicion.
They were the last people to see him alive, the only ones with the opportunity to strangle him on the way to the hospital.
But Gunnarson doesn't even have time to act on this shocking realization.
No. Secundina Donato is found dead the very next day.
Allegedly from sleeping pills. And in this grotesque twist of convenience, who finds her body?
Sergeant Granada. And he's the one who suggests it was suicide.
So the most vocal, most damning critic of the entire police operation is now permanently silenced. The police have closed 2 cases in 2 days, but the criminal network is still completely untouched.
With the Pelly Street leads either dead or silenced, Gunnarson wisely pivots back to the original source of the chaos.
Larry Gaines.
Exactly. He needs to peel back the layers of this man's carefully constructed identity.
And he finds his first real proof of deception, not through police records, but through a forgotten detail, Gaines's old sharkskin wallet, which Ella Barker had held onto.
And inside that wallet is the Rosetta Stone to Gaines's past. It's a high school theater clipping.
Underlined in pencil, praising a newcomer named Harry Haines in the demanding role of Jack Trelawney.
So Larry Gaines is not a real person. It's an alias. He's an actor who dropped out of college but never dropped the habit of performing a role. Harry Haines is the real name.
This search leads Gunnarson to Mountain Grove, where he finds Adelaide Haines, Harry's mother.
And her apartment, and really her mental state, are so crucial to understanding the man who became Larry Gaines.
She's completely delusional. She believes her son, she calls him Henry, another version of Harry, is an artist.
A victim of a vast, systemic conspiracy involving principals and police who covered up the truth. She insists he's on the verge of returning next week or next month.
What stands out here is this deep-seated self-delusion of both the criminal and the mother who's feeding it.
Gaines wasn't just a con man. He was an aspiring actor who failed and then warped that ambition into criminality.
He's a person who walks on the walls of his mother's fantasies, where the earth might break beneath him, but he'll still be the persecuted artist. And that warped self-image fuels his hubris later on.
And finally, Gunnarson tracks down another name on Gaines's contact list, Dougherty.
He visits Kate Dougherty, a simple-minded woman running a struggling variety store.
And she confirms her oldest daughter, Hilda, turned up recently, all dressed up in expensive clothes, wearing a ton of jewelry, claiming to be a movie actress.
But Mrs. Dougherty knows the truth. Hilda was always a play actor and a liar, and she had been running with Haines years ago. They were even arrested together.
This is a critical convergence point. Larry Gaines, whose real name is Harry Haines, the actor/con man,
is running the current high-stakes kidnapping plot with a blonde woman who claims to be a famous actress?
And this woman is apparently the same girl he was running cheap scams with years earlier. Hilda Dougherty, a play-acting liar and a known criminal associate.
So the deep dive is revealing that this high-society kidnapping is actually being run by a low-society scamming duo.
So now the stage is fully set for the culmination of this kidnapping hoax and the ultimate revelation of the criminal network that we now know extends way beyond just Gaines and Hilda.
Right. Colonel Ferguson, He's desperate, emotionally drained. He goes through with the ransom drop.
He delivers the massive $200,000 to Gaines.
But the exploitation is not singular. Almost immediately after that money is exchanged, Ferguson is approached by a second, completely independent shakedown artist.
A man named Salomon from Miami, Florida.
And Salomon claims to be a major stockholder in a gambling corporation. He says Holly Mae, Mrs. Ferguson, has huge overdue gambling debts, $65,000.
This is a fascinating point of analysis. You have Gaines running a kidnapping hoax for $200,000 and Salomon running a blackmail scheme for $65,000.
And they're both exploiting the exact same vulnerability.
Salomon even uses the gossip Holly Mae and the lifeguard as leverage. He threatens to leak information about her gambling and alleged drug use to the press to make sure he gets paid.
And Ferguson is just utterly devastated by Salomon's claims. He confirms to Gunnarson that Holly Mae had indeed run up these debts.
He confesses he thought she was pregnant and was using drugs, and he believes she started gambling to get money for the drugs.
The irony is, whether the woman involved was the real Holly Mae or the impersonator, the debt and the vulnerability were real enough for them to exploit.
Gunnarson, though, he's focused on Gaines and the money. He traces Gaines and the blonde imposter, Hilda, to a mountain hideout.
And this confrontation becomes the explosive climax of the whole narrative. This is where Gaines, just high on his own supply of hubris, decides to monologue.
He's still clinging to his artist persona. He lays out his lethal plan for Gunnarson.
He's going to kill the lawyer, dress the body in his own clothes, and burn the cabin down to fake his own death. Then he'll disappear with Hilda and the $200,000. He's planning his own dramatic exit from the stage.
And here's where it gets really interesting, because in his monologue, he gives up his own accomplices.
He confirms he was the one who tipped off the police about Gus Donato, who he scornfully calls a lousy mechanic who was trying to cut him out.
And then he reveals the full scope of his network. He refers to the true killers, the ambulance drivers, as mere rover boys and errand boys who did his dirty work.
He boasts that he always intended to cut them out of the deal, proclaiming the melon wasn't big enough for so many slices.
It's a classic criminal downfall moment. The overconfident mastermind just spilling his guts before the final curtain.
But just as Gunnarson is grappling with this lethal plan, Hilda, the blonde imposter who is high and spitting like a cat, she grabs Gaines's own revolver and shoots Gunnarson in the shoulder.
Gaines then moves in to suffocate Gunnarson with a mask, determined to complete the fake suicide scene.
It really seems like the end for Gunnarson until the completely unexpected happens.
In a dramatic twist, Gunnarson is saved by the very cop he suspected of corruption and vendetta, Sergeant Granada.
Granada's arrival is shocking because it reframes his earlier actions. You realize Granada was still monitoring this situation, still pursuing leads.
Even if those leads were initially motivated by his personal grudge against Donato.
Exactly. That vendetta, ironically, forced him to look deeper than the official report, and it led him to the true network.
And Detective Wills later explains the full, astonishing conspiracy to the wounded Gunnarson.
Granada, following up on his own hunches and observations, solved the whole puzzle. The real killers of Broadman and Secondhand Donato were the two ambulance drivers,
Whitey Slater and Ronald Spice.
This is maybe the most audacious element of the entire criminal operation. It demands extensive analysis. I mean, think about the implications.
Slater and Spice were the absolute inside men. They were operating with total systemic impunity.
They were using their ambulance shortwave radio, a piece of public service equipment, to monitor police calls. They were providing real-time intelligence for the burglary gang.
This gave them an unbelievable advantage. They weren't just low-level thugs. They were the logistical core and the ultimate cleanup crew.
They were literally being dispatched to crime scenes by the police and then using their authority and access to become assassins,
knocking off injured people for the gang's benefit.
Broadman was the first victim of this cynical operation. He was finished off by strangulation, the DOA rumor, in the ambulance, on Gaines's orders, because Broadman was about to turn them all in.
The death was covered up by the pre-existing head wounds, and the ambulance crew provided the perfect alibi and escape route.
And then when Secondhand Donato panicked and tried to commit suicide by taking sleeping pills after Gus was killed, they were called in and realized the danger.
They finished her off, they made sure she couldn't wake up and talk, and then they framed the death as a successful suicide attempt.
The very institution that's meant to save lives was systemically weaponized as a cleanup and assassination service.
Spice confessed. He tried to throw the primary blame onto his now-dead partner, Whitey Slater, but his knowledge and participation made him equally guilty.
And Spice confirmed that the kidnapping was a total hoax masterminded by Gaines and Hilda to fleece Ferguson out of the $200,000.
With Spice and Slater slated to receive $25,000 each for their logistical support and their silence.
So the pipeline Ferguson feared wasn't a dirty cop on the beat. It was the entire city's emergency response system.
The case has now moved so far beyond petty theft. We've solved a murder. We've uncovered a high-level scam ring.
But the deepest, most tragic layer of the Ferguson affair lies not in the criminality, but in identity and the painful cost of a very old secret.
We finally return to Colonel Ferguson. He is emotionally shattered and under immense duress.
And he reveals his decades-old secret to Gunnarson, a confession that explains his entire fragile existence and his vulnerability.
Back in 1918, while he was a student at Harvard Business School, he abandoned a pregnant girl in Boston named Kathleen Malloy, Katie.
He confesses that he married his current wife, June, the legitimate actress, specifically because she resembled a girl you knew in Boston 25 years ago.
So his high society marriage, his entire attempt at a new life, was founded on this desperate, emotionally manipulative attempt to recapture his youth and erase his guilt over abandoning Katie.
He married a ghost of his past.
And this revelation allows Gunnarson to finally solve the identity tangle of the Dougherty family.
Okay, so let's make sure you, the listener, have a scorecard for this, because the identities are the real weapon here.
Ferguson married the younger half-sister, June Dougherty, who had adopted the professional name Holly May.
And June Dougherty confirms the complexity. She's the legitimate actress, but she says Hilda, the older criminal sister, was always a play actor and a liar.
Hilda ran away years ago and often used June's name to run up bills.
Like the gambling debt Salomon was trying to blackmail Ferguson over.
June states clearly that Hilda was their half-sister. Her father was some guy that Mama knew in Boston who ran out on her and sent $1,000.
And here it is, the core, devastating insight of the entire affair. Gunnarson connects the final dots.
Kate Dougherty, the mother, is actually Kathleen Malloy, or Katie. The girl Ferguson abandoned in Boston in 1918.
Which means her oldest illegitimate daughter, Hilda Dougherty, the criminal mastermind who engineered the kidnapping hoax, conspired with Gaines and shot Gunnarson,
was Colonel Ferguson's own child.
That symmetry of guilt and punishment is just terrifying.
Ferguson's wealth, the money he spent to marry the woman who reminded him of his past, was ultimately extorted from him to fund the criminal enterprises of the daughter he had paid off and abandoned 25 years earlier.
His attempt to escape his past by marrying the look-alike only ensured his past would extract this brutal, generational cost of $200,000 and 2 attempted murders.
The sources show us that the $1,000 check Ferguson sent to Kathleen Malloy in 1918, the check that was supposed to close the book on his mistake,
was the seed of the $200,000 ransom he paid decades later. The debt only compounded with time, violence, and criminal ambition.
And as for the fates of the criminals, they meet appropriately dramatic ends.
Hilda, the criminal daughter, who was also shot by Gaines but survived the cabin fire. She's later killed in a horrific hit-and-run.
She ran into the highway, firing Gaines's own revolver at Mike Spear, Holly May's agent, who was trying to double-cross them, and Spear swerved and struck her.
In the ultimate act of public acknowledgement and contrition, Colonel Ferguson claims the body of the deceased woman.
And he finally admits the truth of his life. She's my daughter, Hilda. The secret, which had powered this entire conspiracy, is finally made public.
And Gaines, the architect of the scheme, is also found dead. His charred jawbone is identified via dental records, confirming he died in the cabin fire.
Probably killed by Hilda during their final violent confrontation, or maybe in a final desperate act.
And the $200,000 in ransom money is recovered from a fittingly theatrical hiding place.
Inside Adelaide Haines' upright grand piano.
Along with a ticket to Rio de Janeiro in the name of the Reverend Carrie Kane.
Suggesting Gaines was planning one last grand performance as a man of the cloth before disappearing forever.
And in the aftermath, the collateral damage is finally cleared. Ella Barker, Gunnarson's initial reluctant client, is cleared of all charges by Spice's confession.
She's released on a property bond put up by a Mrs. Klein. It's a small note of justice in all this.
And Gunnarson, the man who dove into this cesspool of identity theft and murder, finds his life grounded by a sharp contrast to all the surrounding violence and deceit.
His wife, Sally, gives birth to a healthy daughter. It brings a moment of pure, unadulterated, and undeniable reality into a world that was built entirely on aliases and lies. When we look back at the sources for this deep dive, what really stands out is just the breathtaking fragility of identity and the audacity of the criminal enterprise.
Oh, absolutely. This wasn't just a handful of thugs. This was a systemic failure.
The deep dive demonstrates that a low-level burglary ring operated with astonishing sophistication by co-opting institutions meant for public safety.
The ambulance drivers, Whitey Slater and Ronald Spice, they were the true systemic threat. They used their access to police communications and their authority to act as assassins and a cleanup crew.
It's a fundamental breakdown of trust in public services that enabled this entire operation to escalate to murder.
And the Ferguson Affair itself was nothing more than a tragic, convoluted case of self-deception colliding with the consequences of an ancient mistake.
Colonel Ferguson tried to surgically excise a painful past by marrying the look-alike sister June, only to unintentionally enable the crime ring run by his firstborn abandoned child, Hilda.
The entire plot was driven by fabricated identities. You had Larry Gaines, the failed actor turned criminal, and you had Holly May, the legitimate actress whose name was used by her criminal half-sister, Hilda.
This whole scenario just highlights the vulnerability of wealthy, isolated individuals like Ferguson, whose emotional needs, that desperate desire to fill a void left by guilt, made him the perfect target for criminals playing a role.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We often strive to put distance between ourselves and our pasts. We construct new identities, new lives, new careers to escape old mistakes and regrets.
We think a geographic move, a major purchase, or a significant life change can just close the book. But the sources show us that the past never truly goes away.
The cost of a secret, especially one involving deep emotional or familial betrayal, it doesn't just dissipate, it just accrues interest.
How deeply can a person or a crime be buried before the weight of history and the hunger of generational consequence catch up, forcing the true costs of a secret to be paid by an entirely new, unsuspecting generation?
Think about that the next time you try to close the book on an old mistake. Does that check clear the debt, or are you just setting the stage for a much larger future ransom?
A powerful thought to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.